I just wanted to make one mention of something that we discussed earlier at one of these meetings.
All right.
About it was concerning doctrine. In other words, what was doctrine? There's a whole book by Titus Burckhardt, Introduction to Sufi Doctrine.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Yes, which covers nearly every aspect of it and also makes comparisons of Sufi doctrine with Christian doctrine and Buddhist doctrine. And then there's also a book by Martin Lings, What is Sufism? And it has a chapter on doctrine and a chapter on practice or praxis.
Yeah.
Doctrine and method are the two that go hand in hand.
Boy, it's been a lot of years since I read those.
I've read both of them, but yeah, years ago.
Yes. At any rate, they seem to clarify, especially the one I didn't understand a good part of what I had read back then in Titus Burckhardt's book, but after reading it again, I'm beginning to understand. At least I understand what he's saying in some of the areas, and it also gets into a lot. Another topic that we discussed was what was mysticism. Well, he discusses what mysticism is with respect to doctrine, and then he says that the doctrinal foundations are aspects of unity, creation, the archetypes, the renewing of creation at each instant, the spirit, the universal man, union of the doctrine of Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, spirit, and then he gets into spiritual realization and what doctrine has to do with each aspect of that. So, but at any rate, I thought I was glad to be able to find that and go back into it as per our discussion earlier.
Yeah, I should locate those on my bookshelf.
Yeah, I have both that version and then the older one. The older one was translated by D.M. Matheson.
Is that the one published in Lahore? I have one of those too, and it's published I think unofficially in Pakistan.
Yes, that's the one I have. The older one I have, and then the newer one is the introduction has the same title, but it has a foreword by William C. Chittick.
Oh.
And which book? So again, which book are we talking about right now?
I'm talking about the Introduction to Sufi Doctrine. Yeah. And I found the latter one, the one that is forwarded by William C. Chittick, to be much easier to understand. The Matheson translation is a little bit cumbersome. I don't think it's a really great translation.
Yeah, I don't know if the Burckhardt wrote in German or
mostly
French, but
yes,
it was German.
Well, and of course, I think it dips into other languages too. But he was German, and
I think when he wrote in German.
Right, but I think he also borrowed things written in other languages.
Yeah.
Oh well, sure, and I'm sure I can't imagine he didn't know French, but it wasn't his native language.
And then another book that I would recommend, which is edited by William Stoddart, is The Essential Titus Burckhardt. And it's a book that has and it gets into the comparison between each of the traditions in terms of doctrine and why they are different. And in other words, there are reasons for their differences.
Yeah, I may have that one. That one sounds like it's in there on my bookshelf.
Right.
I remember hearing years ago that the community, the Tariqa, when it was still in Lausanne, or maybe even shortly after it moved to Bloomington, there was general understanding that Burckhardt would be the successor to Sheikh Isa, but then he died at a much younger age than they expected. So,
Yes.
Well, he was, I think when I was in Lausanne, he was pretty old. I don't think he was any younger than Sheikh Isa. Maybe, but they were pretty close in age, I think.
We could look that up, I guess.
I think
Yeah,
that,
you can always get that.
he and Sheikh Isa were very much collaborators.
Yes, they were. And they were very close.
Right, exactly.
I mean, when they greeted each other, it was, different. It was obvious they were old friends or something. Yeah.
So,
I had even heard that, Burckhardt had the qualifications to be a sheikh, but deferred to Sheikh Isa.
Right.
I had heard that, but why not? I can believe it.
Right. I think, basically maybe his occupation was in the area primarily of restoring traditional art.
Right.
And making it understandable to people. And I think he spent most of his teaching effort in that area. And he really
was part of that World Festival of Islam that took place in England, wasn't he?
What did you say?
He was part of that World Festival of Islam or whatever they had in England in the 70s.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think most
sure
of
he was a prime mover in that.
Yeah, most of the authors, I think, in the Tariqa were involved in that. So question number 1.
Yes.
All right, question number 1. If a person has witnessed someone they care about manipulated by an evil person, and one has approached the person they care about, but they don't believe the person in question is actually manipulative and evil, how may one enlighten the person before it is too late and the demonic individual has sucked dry their life force?
No, I don't think there's a manual for that.
Right.
Boy, I would, if it was somebody I knew and cared about, then that would guide my approach. And
right.
I don't know if there's a general answer available.
Well, the situation is there are two people relating to this manipulative and evil person, one of whom has one opinion and then the other one disagrees, and one of them may be right, one of them may be wrong, but which one is it? The question assumes that the first person has discerned the truth, and the person he cares for is blind for some reason.
Yeah, or clueless at least.
It may be the case or not.
Well, I'm going to assume that the manipulator is in fact the manipulator. I would say that one thing that maybe can be generalized is you could point to the behavior that you think might illustrate it if one only thought about it for a second, and you draw the person's attention to the behavior and say, gee, I wonder why he did that.
Well, yes, you can take this question at face value that the players are actually fall in the categories that it describes.
Well,
or you can consider it to be some kind of a triangular situation in which two persons are vying for the following of this person.
Well,
and each would consider the other as in some ways a threat to his spiritual life.
Yeah, but I'm taking at face value the wording of the question.
Right.
Manipulated by an evil person. I'll just go ahead and accept that. That's the question that was asked. I don't think we have to think about how it might be otherwise. We can deal with the question, as it stands.
I think as it stands, I was just pointing out that I have seen possibilities where different people would want the following of a person and assume, or you might say, consider the other person who was a rival to be evil.
I'm not talking about rivals here, and I'm not
Yeah.
talking about hypotheticals in which case there's a subjective difference between two people that may have some sort of difference of opinion. I'm talking about something objectively where one person has a moral high ground and the other person is behaving in immoral, possibly illegal, possibly, just unethical ways, or just ways that, let's say, go against the principles of a particular, organization, or even just being an icky human being. I mean, I used evil simply to make it, very black and white, but I'm just posing this as a hypothetical here to try to make the answer as easy and direct as possible.
Right. And it says someone they care about. So we're not in a power triangle here.
No. It's not about someone wanting power over someone else. It's
Right.
about someone seeing someone maybe, being taken advantage of and wanting to help that person not be taken advantage of.
Yep.
Okay. Then, a whole lot rests upon what level the person that is being manipulated is capable of understanding.
Sure, but let's assume that the person who cares about that person knows them well enough to perhaps know how to approach them.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm a big believer in asking questions, because you can't just unveil some image in front of somebody and expect them to interpret it properly. I think you have to get them engaged in thinking about the situation and put them in a place where they have to be critical, not in the negative sense, but in the sense that they have to evaluate. And then a choice comment here and there may reinforce if they lean the right way. It's a tough situation.
Well, I worked for the federal government, a federal agency, for 25 years. And the most interesting job I had was the last 4 years I was there. I worked as an enforcement attorney. And I was working with others who had been doing it for years and were a lot more experienced at that particular field than me, but I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned was how to conduct investigations.
Mm-hmm.
It does involve asking a lot of people, a lot of different people, a lot of different questions. And it may be the question that we're focused on would need a third person like me, who's an experienced investigator, to come in and say, well, now, is this manipulative evil person really manipulative?
Yeah, sure.
If so, can I accumulate enough evidence to show the person that is being manipulated that, I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm afraid the facts show that this person's not who you thought he was.
Yeah, but it's in a legal situation, it's more cut and dried. And in a personal situation, you can't always be quite as direct. People are less willing to hear the facts sometimes.
Well,
They're
yeah,
emotionally invested.
exactly. And sometimes, just as an example, sometimes someone can be in let's say, a romantic relationship, for instance, and almost be addicted to someone, like being addicted to alcohol or drugs.
Yes.
And they might even know that the person's bad for them, but they're so addicted to the person that they keep on wasting their time, their energy, their money, all these different things. Or even not even that, but just their emotional energies on this person, giving themselves stress simply because they're like, this person means something to me. But then sometimes I feel like the best thing to do is for someone to take a step back and, as you know, Sidi Izzadeen was saying, maybe not be confronted by someone else they know, but a third party who says, you know, whether it's a psychiatrist or some sort of professional or something, say, you know, I can see this is taking a lot out of you. Sometimes the best thing to do is to walk away, even temporarily.
Yeah, even temporarily. Yeah, if I can get that experience.
Well, if you turn it into a triangle of you being antagonistic towards the person who's
well, you have to avoid that.
And you're liable to get into unsolvable situations.
Well, this person is important to the other person, and if you attack them, you're going to have no effect at all.
Right.
You'll light up all the defenses. But,
well, and I've seen that in the past where there's something that, you know, a long time ago. I'll give a personal example. I saw someone who was long time ago, someone who was friends with someone. This person was clearly not interested in the other person's friendship, but just like really, you know, using and abusing this person. So I said, hey, you know, do you see what's going on here? And then I lost that friendship for a number of years, because that person said, hey, you know, clearly you're against this person, so you're against me.
Yeah, exactly.
Only years and years and years later did the person reach out to me after I didn't hear from the person for a long time and say, oh, you know what, you were right. Sometimes the best thing to do is to get a third person involved. Sometimes the best thing to do is to subtly say things. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just realize that there's nothing you can do. Right. It's complicated. Robots are easy to deal with. People are humans, and humans are complex.
You know, when I read the question, I thought about codependency and remembered a cartoon I saw years ago. There were two ducks, and one of them had her wing wrapped around a decoy, and she was saying, oh, but he'll change.
The decoy wasn't really
yeah, exactly.
One of the live ducks thought it was a duck, and
yeah, it was obviously it was, you know, making the point that some people can't change.
Yeah, that decoy will become a real duck if you just have
if you're in a
patience.
relationship that depends on changing the other person, you have probably got, you know,
you just have to have a lot of patience if it's a decoy and not a real duck.
Yeah, if you just wait long enough, right, and see if it changes before it starts to, the termites get to it.
Yeah,
before the termites eat it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
anyway, I think we did a good job with this question. Let's get on to some other things so that we're not just doing one question. And that's number 2.
Sure.
What's the point of the devil other than scaring little kids into submission? Isn't the whole idea of the devil inconsistent with esotericism? And isn't the concept of the devil, not the devil himself, a nefarious force which rots religions from the inside out?
Well, it's psychologically dangerous, and it's attractive because it's easy. And with children, you can't explain everything to them. So it's equivalent to the boogeyman, or the evil gypsies who will steal your children and drink their blood. That sounds familiar. But when it gets to adults, they ought to be able to grow beyond that. But, you know, I mean, if they think God is a guy sitting up with a beard, up there with a beard, they may have some need to believe the devil is sitting nearby with horns and et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's easier than dealing with the problem of evil, which theologians have argued about forever. But you need something a little bit more useful than just the scary thing that you never see hiding in the dark.
Well, people are manipulated all too often by the imposition of external threats.
Yeah, fear.
So you're actually kind of teaching them, on the one hand, you may be preventing them from falling into error, but on the other hand, you may be teaching them that the way of the world is to get people to do what you want them to do by posing external threats.
Yeah, you're inculcating fear, and that's pretty far away from knowledge and understanding.
So I don't know, you may be building in an attitude that you don't really want to be the case.
No, you're harming the child.
So I always say the devil is the personification of evil.
Yeah.
And there have been a couple occasions in my life, and I may have talked about them on these groups, but once one or two of them, but in which I've encountered either people that I thought were truly satanic. I didn't think, oh, you're the devil himself, but they were truly evil people. And
I knew one of them.
The devil is just, kind of like it's a symbol of evil or personified form, mythological form.
Right.
And it's not something that you may tell children about it,
but it doesn't.
That's the best way to talk about it,
Well, yeah, except that unlike the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, you don't outgrow it necessarily without help.
I mean, that sort of thing is being practiced on us on a daily basis by everybody from advertisers to government.
Yeah, fear is a great manipulation tool.
Right.
I mean, we're afraid that our peer group will see us as too nerdy if we don't buy the right clothes, or whatever it is. I just, even on a relatively safe level, it's still trying to convince you to be afraid of not being enough unless you buy their product. And it's more subtle there. People don't see that as being the same thing as bullies who want you to be afraid, and politicians who want you to be afraid of their enemies and stuff like that. It's almost as soon, once you're an adult and you're using fear very much, you're dishonest. When I see somebody using fear very much, they've got a dishonest intent. It's like, oh, we have to save our children. Well, of course, everybody wants to save their children.
Well, they may or may not be dishonest. They may be generally fearful, and are trying to.
Well, that's right.
In a spirit of, there's something dangerous out there, and I should tell you about it.
They may have been corrupted already by fear, and they're passing it on. But fear is pretty toxic. The only fears that are really any good are the ones that are more or less instinctive, that prompt you to get away from a lion or jump out of the path of a bus or something like that. Those are pure and clean and simple, and wired in, I hope.
Now, there are some things that it is prudent to be afraid of.
It is,
because they really are dangerous, and it's risky.
Oh, there are. Yeah, you can't trust everybody. If they're trying to get you to do something, you need to question it immediately. Other than, could you run down to the store and get me a quart of milk,
What was the question again?
What's the point of the devil other than scaring little kids? And
well, we've talked about.
The problem is that the adults remain scared of it. That's the real problem.
No, I think the devil has to be understood beyond just scaring little kids.
Well, that's what the Satanists say too. The devil is just misunderstood. But the devil is almost inevitably misunderstood, because that influence is deceiving.
We say as metaphysicians that the evil itself is just the absence of. It's a privation. It's the absence of goodness, not a positive actual reality in and of itself.
Right. And the notion of the devil, I think, encourages people to disregard finding devil inwardly, because there's practically no evil thing that doesn't exist, at least as a potentiality in everybody.
What is it in the Quran, the word for
Iblis?
yes, is just one character different than that for, you might say, the prophet or a divine personage. Let's see, what is it? So you might say he is an imitator of goodness.
Sure.
And a subtle imitator of it. It says even in the Gospels that the devil is a gentleman.
Yes, exactly, and charming, I've heard, and which reminds me of one of those people I thought embodied it in a certain way. He ended up mailing a bomb to a romantic rival and went to prison.
Well, we talk about the Antichrist. Is the Antichrist just another word for personification of evil, or is the Antichrist the devil?
Right, I think so. I think in Iblis is the word that is, I forget what the word for the good of that is, but I know that Iblis is just one character off from what
the opposite.
At least in English, we have the advantage that the name devil is only one character off from evil, and it's clear.
Add a D and you get.
Yeah.
And one of the ways, of course, of deluding people and moving them is to pretend to be good.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's called Antichrist.
Right.
And he would deceive even the elect if that were possible. So obviously he's a fake deceiver.
And so I just think that those kinds of things need to be explained to the level that the child is able to understand.
Yes, but you don't need to create you don't really have to create a monster for the child. You just simply have to say that there are people out there who aren't good and will victimize you to get what they want. And fortunately, they're very rare. Only a few of them are violent, and unless if you see something that makes you think somebody might be like that, then keep your distance and figure it out, or just keep your distance. But to posit, yet another monster in the pantheon of monster that kids grow up with today.
You're going to be encountering these kinds of things throughout your life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good idea to get as much experience of it as you can without going to the level of horror or anything like that.
Well, that's true. But the thing about the devil is you can't do anything about the devil. You can't be on the lookout for him exactly. He's not going to show up wearing his horns.
Well, every place you go nowadays, there will be people who want to delude you in order to get your support, to get your vote, to do whatever, and they really don't care anything about you.
Yeah.
And they don't care that they've deluded you. In fact, the consequences of what they've done don't bother them in the least. So you have to in fact instill a certain degree of caution.
Yeah, don't take a ride with a stranger. I mean obviously the kids need to have some ideas that help them be safe, but honestly I don't think the devil helps that much, except that it scares them that they're doomed to hell, usually if they don't follow a particular religious form. And I think that's dishonest. I mean, the person saying it may not think it's dishonest, but it's a disservice. Let me put it that way. It's too simple, and it has to be something you can think about later. As you get older, and you can't think much about the devil.
Right. Well, I think it has been somewhat, what do they call, hellfire?
Yeah.
Permanence. and hellfire and damnation.
Yes, that's right.
You have to, that builds in a certain kind of attitude in people's minds that they can't accept the ability, they no longer have the ability to judge things very well because they have to accept this kind of attitude.
Right. And it treats everybody as basically unintelligent and unable to understand anything. And so, you know, the first thing you need to do is be afraid.
Right.
And we can, and I can tell you where your salvation lies or your safety lies, either one.
And I think the only antidote to being deceived by the devil or somebody who's out to harm you or deceive you or something is discernment. And we spend a good part of our spiritual lives trying to cultivate our own discernment, the ability to.
But they don't do that in the hellfire and brimstone congregations.
The statement that's made often in Islam is discern between the real and the illusory, and the real.
Yeah, I think it fits better into that perspective.
Right.
There's a less harmful place for him there, but I think there are a number of preachers who are a lot more obsessed with the devil than they are with God.
Right.
And then you begin looking outward and finding evil everywhere you look. It just, to a certain extent, it's there everywhere you look because we live in the fallen world or whatever, but that doesn't make everything evil.
Well, I knew an older lady who grew up in the environment of the hell and preaching and what have you. And she had a hard time realizing that God loved her.
Yeah, understandably.
The only thing that seemed to stick in her mind was her perception of her own evilness and the certainty that she was going to be condemned for it.
Right. I've been reading an autobiographical book about an evangelical fundamentalist growing out of his limited understanding. I'm only partway through the book, but he talks about how the thing that in his organization or his community, one of the things that you were expected to do to indicate that you were correctly one of the faithful is to confess your sins all the time. And if you wouldn't do that, then you obviously lacked humility, and on and on and on. There are two traps in that world.
Is this person well known? We would recognize his name?
No, I don't know what it is. I'd have to pick up the book and look.
Yeah, I think that the fear technique is not a good approach, actually.
No, it has too many negative side effects.
Right.
This is called Inside the Evangelical Movement That Failed a Generation. The title is Testimony by John Ward, J-O-N, Ward. And I don't know anything about him other than professionally he's been a reporter and a writer, and he describes his journey through, writing for a number of different kinds of newspapers and getting to see that the world was larger. As a reporter, he had to investigate things. Anyway, I've been enjoying it. The man seems to have a clear head and a good heart.
I think one of the things about the preachers of hellfire and brimstone is it has a kind of an entertainment value. It can be very interesting to follow. And
yeah, that's
they usually don't stay anywhere very long. They come and put their tent up and get their crowd, and then after that,
some of them build churches of thousands of people.
Yes.
I think that part of it is entertainment, and moving people emotionally with base emotions rather than higher emotions, and energizing them with the energy of you at the pulpit, raising your voice and waving your hands, and that kind of thing is not necessary. There's probably a place for it, but it would be a small place.
A lot of those Protestant services that you would go to, people were enjoined to come up front and
Confess your sins before the
I mean, there's two things: confessing your sins and accepting the Lord, and then you're reborn, and then all you have to do is confess.
Yeah, I have this past Sunday, I happened to catch a little snippet of one of these Sunday morning preachers. I think this was Joel Osteen. You know,
I know the name. I don't know much about it.
Got a crowd of 10,000 people. He's man like in his late 40s, early 50s, and his sermon was, this life is wonderful. You're all saved, and it's wonderful to be God's servants. And I mean, there was nothing fearful or bombastic about it. It was just very positive.
No, he's somebody that has a large following because he tells people what they want to hear, and a lot of what he has to say is good. I don't think he's evil, but I think he's a real dead end for a lot of people. I've seen online a number of people who came through him to being more serious seekers, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
I know one priest that I talked with, an Orthodox priest, he said, well, we don't have any moral policemen here.
Yeah, good. No, we have to police our own souls.
Yes, right.
Well, I would propose that we wrap it up, but we can't go to another question, and we may have exhausted unless somebody has other comments on this question.
Well, I would just say that the entire idea of an evil being like a devil only comes into play once you've accepted monotheism. The older religions, shamanism, polytheism, paganism, whatever, they didn't have a devil.
No, but they did have some negative forces personified sometimes.
Absolutely, they had negative forces, but you didn't have any one thing that was a devil, which is, and they also didn't try to scare people, say, oh, there's eternal damnation,
exactly.
Oh, this thing's coming after you and it's trying to infiltrate your mind and turn you to bad things, so that you've got an 80-year lifetime, but you're going to be damned forever. All of that really comes from, really a lot of it comes from Persian religion, Manichaeanism and whatnot. And so essentially the modern monotheism, at least as practiced in an exoteric manner, really is fundamentally dualist.
It is. That's the thing that I was about to say, actually, is that it posits a power almost if not equally on the same amount of power as God, because it's clear that if God didn't want there to be a devil, he wouldn't be there, and therefore God is a servant of, the devil is a servant of God in some perverse way. I think it is Manichaean.
Not only that, but by separating off certain things that, certain religious people, tend to think of as the good from the bad, you tend to end up with this strange kind of bifurcation, and that's not always going in the favor of religion. For instance, I saw this article once saying, the interesting thing, you look through Dante, Inferno, Paradiso, Purgatorio. In fact, despite all of the tortures and everything, the Inferno is much more of an interesting place. Once you get into this kind of dualism, paradise becomes very sterile and lacking in life. And who wants that? Because ultimately, reality is beautiful. And sometimes, religion has a way of taking all of the beauty out of life.
And the simplistic explanations leave heaven a pretty boring place.
Yes.
Well, I think, of course, William Blake in one of his poems talks about the men who wear black, the priests. He's talking about the priests, and he is criticizing that particular aspect that you're in his poem that is being expressed here. However, I think basically the problem here is a misunderstanding. It's not that monotheism that is the problem. The problem is a misunderstanding of what.
Yes, I mean, and the thing is, we have a dualistic mind, and we're always going to find something to contrast.
Yes,
and it's a false equivalence. It's but it puts them on the same logical level and the same even the same emotional level in terms of one being absolutely evil and threatening and the other being infinitely forgiving, and there's a contradiction there. There's a paradox.
right.
Sidi Daoud, if you could find that Blake poem and share it with us next time, I would love to.
I'll find it for maybe the next time. I would have to go rummaging through my closet here for the next hour and a half. So.
Don't suffer too much over it.
So unless the world ends between now and then, we'll reconvene next Tuesday.
Yeah,
yes.
We will, inshallah. All right. Well, let's go now and reunite later.
Save the world. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, we have 2 days in which to save the world before our next meeting. All right. Or no, we got a few more than that.
We got a few more than that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, we ought to be able to do it then.
We ought to be able
Oh,
to do it.
no problem.